So there are some people I know who are sincere and are perhaps more ready to move in the right direction, but they don't know of these things. And I don't know how to proceed. You said sometimes it might be useful to recommend them to you. Other times it might just be useful to give them these other works aside from Cleary and Shaw, not those. What do you recommend? People who
In
aren't.
my recent experience, which would cover about the last 5 years, 10 years, I would say that the Four Agreements is a great introductory text for just basically anybody, business people, so on and so forth, because number one, it was a New York Times bestseller in business for I don't know how long, maybe 6 weeks, maybe 6 months, maybe a year. And so business people take to it. And if they take to a book, that means it's quick, it's got useful content, and it's easy to read, and it's um, accessible in every way. And I would say that's true of the Four Agreements. Now, if you have someone who's more cerebrally inclined, then you would have to use your judgment. But Krishnamurti, which is in the wide public domain, is one possibility. Another one would be just the intro text to the Sufis. I mean, the Sufis is a public book. That's not a book that was published in house, and so that's a good intro book. But again, you have to have people who are inclined to reading materials that are pretty dense, and so they would have to be a reader in order to take something on like that. Let's see. For Christians, I think, or for non-Christians that are vacillating, I think Scott Peck, People of the Lie, or The Road Less Traveled. It's an oldie, but a goodie. There was also, you mentioned Tolle. That's always great stuff. He's got two very good books out, at least. Rupert Spira, that's too advanced for most folks, unless they're already in Dharma. Um, Clary, as wonderful as he is, requires quite a bit of focus, concentration, and discipline, and of course the rewards are commensurate with that. But in general, the only book of his that's really sold well is The Art of War, which was very sad. Uh, but he won't be appreciated fully for another 400 years, at which point he will be, considered a Buddhist saint of the highest order. Well, he wanted to be considered Buddhist because he made a real point of not being Buddhist and not being anything that people could accuse him of being biased. And so, again, so much depends on the individual. It's hard to know. There's an art to it. But the book that I use the book and have the best result with for people that are totally naive to all of this is the Four Agreements. And those books began to deteriorate very quickly when he started writing second one and third books on demand from the witches in Northern California that compelled him to do that. Okay, now without knowing anything more about the individual, I can't say much more. But as a general rule of thumb, if a book has been popular in the in the open public press, the popular press, then you could feel more easy recommending it. And then there's many others. Wayne Dwyer, way back in the day. You have to keep up, and you have to. I mean, if you're going to be helping other folks, and you need to keep up with the latest teaching technologies, the latest verbiage, all the latest and greatest stuff. Of course, nothing has changed, but if you want to get across to folks, you have to speak in a language that they can respond to. As you remember, that the story of the rag picker who passed out in the street. Do you remember that story from Idris Shah?
Maybe if you mention it, I'll probably jog my memory.
A rag picker passed out I think it was in one of the narrow streets the Medina, somewhere in the Middle East, and people tried to resuscitate him, and because here he was, he's passed out in the middle of the little narrow street, and they started with smelling salts and no response, and then they thought, well, maybe it's because it smells bad, and they may have tried something else or not. I don't know. I always butcher these beautiful stories, but the end result was that they had to put a dirty rag under his nose. He had to respond to something that he could respond to, that he knew. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So obviously, this is not about rag pickers or resuscitating people. It's about how do we get through to people who have not had the great fortune of learning about this, and most of the world has never even heard of enlightenment. The vast majority of the world has not even heard that such an opportunity and such a potential that's equally available to all of us, something that's inherent equally in every one of us. It doesn't matter whether it's you, me. It doesn't matter if it was, Al Gore or George Bush. They've all got the same dharma within, the same consciousness within. And so the fact that this is not more known is, I believe, going to be a temporary problem. In the past, people literally had to travel in order to get any teaching. So you would have people literally traveling from the Middle East to China. It even says so in the Quran, seek knowledge all the way to as far as China. And so they were traveling, and remember, there were no printing presses or anything like that. So that was tough. In my day, it was tough because everything was in a foreign language, Zen and Japanese and Chinese, Chan and Chinese, Tibetan and Tibetan, and Indian and Sanskrit, and it's a big mess. But now that problem is been solved for us by the machines, and so we can have instantaneous translations of the teachings and of the text. So now it's a matter of just selecting those parts that are most germane, whatever the level of the student. And as you know well, the admonition of the Sufis, which is to accord with the level and capacity of the student to understand. That's one thing. The second thing that's important in terms of wisdom is shield the shorn lamb from the wind, right? By which I think they're referring to, you don't want to, when you possess truth, you can be devastating to people. And you can also, use your whatever to help them along, sometimes very rapidly, if their consciousness is open. So what you don't want to do is shut all that down by inadvertently using a word that is misinterpreted one way, or and so you have to be very careful with all that. Then you get into all the problems with capitalization, because big mind and small mind are very different things, and distinguishing them is very important. But you can see how over the centuries they've struggled to find, well, maybe we should use another word instead of mind. So they say, okay, Buddha. And then they go, oh, no, well, maybe it should be Buddha mind. And they go, no, don't make it Buddha mind. Let's make it the kingdom of heaven, for the Christians. Or let's make it, ablation of the ego or the self. Or let's make it, we can go on literally for infinity, giving names to something that has no form, has no characteristics whatsoever, except love beyond any human capacity to even imagine, much less experience. I mean, love, the real thing, love with a capital L, truth with a capital T, beauty with a capital B. All of these things are inherent, but they're not. It's very difficult to convey how something is beyond existence and non-existence. So the poor Zen guys are trying to teach, hey, this thing, it exists, but it doesn't exist. It's both existent and not non-existent. No, it's existent, not non-existent, and also non-existent and not non-existent, right? So they're struggling as hard as they can. But what they're trying to say is, look, what we're talking about, which is God, right? Which is God, truth, beauty, love, everything good in this cosmos and more. It has no characteristics of its own except love and creativity, both so far beyond the human capacity to even imagine that it's gobsmacking. And that's putting it very, very lightly. It will knock you to the ground and you won't get up. It happened to me for like, I don't know how long I was out, probably maybe a couple of weeks. So you don't want to approach this stuff casually or in the wrong way, because you can really blow some circuits. Take it from someone who has. And so it is. But so it is with any endeavor. You have to teach vocabulary, and then you have to use vocabulary, and that's always a continuous process. And our great debt to the Sufis is they understood more than anyone else on the planet that we have to update constantly, that we're always going to change the teachings to accord with the time, to accord with the methods, to accord with the people, to accord with the culture, to accord with religion, right? So Sufism goes way back before Islam, as does every mystic tradition. And you can see it very easily when you look at the sutras. One of those sutras that I've been posting about recently shows how clearly some of the metaphors and images and powerful similes come directly from the Bhutanese cultural sphere, or from India directly.